Microsoft Office, or simply Office, is the former name of a family of client software, server software, and services developed by Microsoft. It was first announced by Bill Gates on August 1, 1988, at Comdex in Las Vegas. Initially a marketing term for an Office suite, the first version of Office contained Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, and Microsoft PowerPoint. Over the years, Office applications have grown substantially closer with shared features such as a common spell checker, object linking and embedding data integration and Visual Basic for application scripting language. Microsoft also positions Office as a development platform for line-of-business software under the Office Business Applications brand. It contains a word processor, a spreadsheet program and a presentation program, an email client, a database management system, and a desktop publishing app. Office is produced in several versions targeted towards different end users and computing environments. The original, and most widely used version, is the desktop version, available for PCs running the Windows and Mac OS operating systems. Microsoft also maintains mobile apps for Android and iOS. Office on the web is a version of the software that runs within a web browser. Since Office 2013, Microsoft has promoted Office 365 as the primary means of obtaining Microsoft Office. It allows the use of the software and other services on a subscription business model, and users receive feature updates to the software for the lifetime of the subscription, including new features and cloud computing integration that are not necessarily included in the on-premises releases of Office sold under conventional license terms. In 2017, revenue from Office 365 overtook conventional license sales. Microsoft also rebranded most of their standard Office 365 editions as Microsoft 365 to reflect their inclusion of features and services beyond the core Microsoft Office suite. In October 2022, Microsoft announced that it will phase out the Microsoft Office brand in favor of Microsoft 365 by January 2023. The name will continue to be used for legacy product offerings. Genealogy. By marketing role. Microsoft, the developer of Windows, has registered several trademarks, each of which denotes a family of Windows operating systems that target a specific sector of the computing industry. As of 2014, the following Windows families were being actively developed. Windows NT started as a family of operating systems with Windows NT 3.1, an operating system for server computers and workstations. It now consists of 3 operating system subfamilies that are released almost at the same time and share the same kernel. Windows, the operating system for mainstream personal computers and tablets. The latest version is Windows 11. The main competitor of this family is Mac OS by Apple for personal computers and iPadOS and Android for tablets. Windows Server, the operating system for server computers. The latest version is Windows Server 2022. Unlike its client sibling, it has adopted a strong naming scheme. The main competitor of this family is Linux. Windows PE, a lightweight version of its Windows sibling, meant to operate as a live operating system, used for installing Windows on bare metal computers, recovery, or troubleshooting purposes. The latest version is Windows PE 10. Windows IoT. Initially, Microsoft developed Windows CE as a general-purpose operating system for every device that was too resource-limited to be called a full-fledged computer. Eventually, however, Windows CE was renamed Windows Embedded Compact and was folded under Windows Compact trademark, which also consists of Windows Embedded Industry, Windows Embedded Professional, Windows Embedded Standard, Windows Embedded Handheld and Windows Embedded Automotive. The following Windows families are no longer being developed. Windows 9X, an operating system that targeted the consumer market. Discontinued because of suboptimal performance. Microsoft now caters to the consumer market with Windows NT. Windows Mobile, the predecessor to Windows Phone, it was a mobile phone operating system. The first version was called Pocket PC 2000, the third version, Windows Mobile 2003, is the first version to adopt the Windows Mobile trademark. The last version is Windows Mobile 6.5. Windows Phone, an operating system sold only to manufacturers of smartphones. The first version was Windows Phone 7, followed by Windows Phone 8, and Windows Phone 8.1. It was succeeded by Windows 10 Mobile, which is now also discontinued. Version history. The term Windows collectively describes any or all of several generations of Microsoft operating system products. These products are generally categorized as follows. Early versions. The history of Windows dates back to 1981 when Microsoft started work on a program called Interface Manager. It was announced in November 1983 under the name Windows, but Windows 1.0 was not released until November 1985. Windows 1.0 was to compete with Apple's operating system, but achieved little popularity. Windows 1.0 is not a complete operating system, rather, it extends MS-DOS. The shell of Windows 1.0 is a program known as the MS-DOS Executive. Components included calculator, calendar, card file, clipboard viewer, clock, control panel, notepad, paint, reverse, terminal and write. Windows 1.0 does not allow overlapping windows. Instead, all windows are tiled. Only modal dialog boxes may appear over other windows. Microsoft sold as included Windows development libraries with the C development environment, which included numerous Windows samples. Windows 2.0 was released in December 1987, and was more popular than its predecessor. It features several improvements to the user interface and memory management. Windows 2.03 changed the OS from tiled windows to overlapping windows. The result of this change led to Apple Computer filing a suit against Microsoft alleging infringement on Apple's copyrights. Windows 2.0 also introduced more sophisticated keyboard shortcuts and could make use of expanded memory. Windows 2.1 was released in two different versions, Windows/286 and Windows/386. Windows/386 uses the Virtual 8086 mode of the Intel 80386 to multitask several DOS programs and the paged memory model to emulate expanded memory using available extended memory. Windows/286, in spite of its name, runs on both Intel 8086 and Intel 80286 processors. It runs in real mode but can make use of the high memory area. In addition to full Windows packages, there were runtime-only versions that shipped with early Windows software from third parties and made it possible to run their Windows software on MS-DOS and without the full Windows feature set. The early versions of Windows are often thought of as graphical shells, mostly because they ran on top of MS-DOS and use it for file system services. However, even the earliest Windows versions already assumed many typical operating system functions, notably, having their own executable file format and providing their own device drivers. Unlike MS-DOS, Windows allowed users to execute multiple graphical applications at the same time, through cooperative multitasking. Windows implemented an elaborate, segment-based, software virtual memory scheme, which allows it to run applications larger than available memory. Code segments and resources are swapped in and thrown away when memory became scarce. Data segments moved in memory when a given application had relinquished processor control. Windows 3.x. Windows 3.0, released in 1990, improved the design, mostly because of virtual memory and loadable virtual device drivers that allow Windows to share arbitrary devices between multitasked DOS applications. Windows 3.0 applications can run in protected mode, which gives them access to several megabytes of memory without the obligation to participate in the software virtual memory scheme. They run inside the same address space, where the segmented memory provides a degree of protection. Windows 3.0 also featured improvements to the user interface. Microsoft rewrote critical operations from C into assembly. Windows 3.0 was the first version of Windows to achieve broad commercial success, selling 2 million copies in the first 6 months. Windows 3.1, made generally available on March 1, 1992, featured a facelift. In August 1993, Windows for Workgroups, a special version with integrated peer-to-peer networking features and a version number of 3.11, was released. It was sold along with Windows 3.1. Support for Windows 3.1 ended on December 31, 2001. Windows 3.2, released 1994, is an updated version of the Chinese version of Windows 3.1. The update was limited to this language version, as it fixed only issues related to the complex writing system of the Chinese language. Windows 3.2 was generally sold by computer manufacturers with a 10-disk version of MS-DOS that also had simplified Chinese characters in basic output and some translated utilities. Windows 9X. The next major consumer-oriented release of Windows, Windows 95, was released on August 24, 1995. While still remaining MS-DOS-based, Windows 95 introduced support for native 32-bit applications, plug-and-play hardware, preemptive multitasking, long file names of up to 255 characters, and provided increased stability over its predecessors. Windows 95 also introduced a redesigned, object-oriented user interface, replacing the previous Program Manager with the Start menu, taskbar, and Windows Explorer shell. Windows 95 was a major commercial success for Microsoft. Ina Fried of CNET remarked that by the time Windows 95 was finally ushered off the market in 2001, it had become a fixture on computer desktops around the world. Microsoft published 4 OEM service releases of Windows 95, each of which was roughly equivalent to a service pack. The first OSR of Windows 95 was also the first version of Windows to be bundled with Microsoft's web browser, Internet Explorer. Mainstream support for Windows 95 ended on December 31, 2000, and extended support for Windows 95 ended on December 31, 2001. Windows 95 was followed up with the release of Windows 98 on June 25, 1998, which introduced the Windows driver model, support for USB composite devices, support for ACPI, hibernation, and support for multi-monitor configurations. Windows 98 also included integration with Internet Explorer 4 through Active Desktop and other aspects of the Windows Desktop update. In May 1999, Microsoft released Windows 98 Second Edition, an updated version of Windows 98. Windows 98 SE added Internet Explorer 5.0 and Windows Media Player 6.2 amongst other upgrades. Mainstream support for Windows 98 ended on June 30, 2002, and extended support for Windows 98 ended on July 11, 2006. On September 14, 2000, Microsoft released Windows Me, the last DOS-based version of Windows. Windows Me incorporated visual interface enhancements from its Windows NT-based counterpart Windows 2000, had faster boot times than previous versions, expanded multimedia functionality, additional system utilities such as System File Protection and System Restore, and updated home networking tools. However, Windows Me was faced with criticism for its speed and instability, along with hardware compatibility issues and its removal of real-mode DOS support. PC World considered Windows ME to be one of the worst operating systems Microsoft had ever released, and the fourth worst tech product of all time. Windows NT. Version history. The term Windows collectively describes any or all of several generations of Microsoft operating system products. These products are generally categorized as follows. Early versions. Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8 and 8.1, Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 365, Multilingual support, Platform support, Windows CE. Windows CE is an edition of Windows that runs on minimalistic computers, like satellite navigation systems and some mobile phones. Windows Embedded Compact is based on its own dedicated kernel, dubbed Windows CE kernel. Microsoft licenses Windows CE to OEMs and device makers. The OEMs and device makers can modify and create their own user interfaces and experiences, while Windows CE provides the technical foundation to do so. Windows CE was used in the Dreamcast along with Sega's own proprietary OS for the console. Windows CE was the core from which Windows Mobile was derived. Its successor, Windows Phone 7, was based on components from both Windows CE 6.0 R3 and Windows CE 7.0. Windows Phone 8, however, is based on the same NT kernel as Windows 8. Windows Embedded Compact is not to be confused with Windows XP Embedded or Windows NT 4.0 Embedded, modular editions of Windows based on Windows NT kernel. Xbox OS. Xbox OS is an unofficial name given to the version of Windows that runs on Xbox consoles. From Xbox One onwards it is an implementation with an emphasis on virtualization, as it is 3 operating systems running at once, consisting of the core operating system, a second implemented for games, and a more Windows-like environment for applications. Microsoft updates Xbox One's OS every month, and these updates can be downloaded from the Xbox Live service to the Xbox and subsequently installed, or by using offline recovery images downloaded via a PC. It was originally based on NT 6.2 kernel, and the latest version runs on an NT 10.0 base. This system is sometimes referred to as Windows 10 on Xbox One or One Core. Xbox One and Xbox Series operating systems also allow limited backward compatibility with previous generation hardware, and the Xbox 360's system is backwards compatible with the original Xbox. Version control system. Up to and including every version before Windows 2000, Microsoft used an in-house version control system named Source Library Manager. Shortly after Windows 2000 was released, Microsoft switched to a fork of Perforce named Source Depot. This system was used up until 2017 once the system couldn't keep up with the size of Windows. Microsoft had begun to integrate Git into Team Foundation Server in 2013, but Windows continued to rely on Source Depot. The Windows code was divided among 65 different repositories with a kind of virtualization layer to produce unified view of all of the code. In 2017, Microsoft announced that it would start using Git, an open-source version control system created by Linus Torvalds, and in May 2017 they reported that has completed migration into the Git repository. Vifs for Git. Because of its large, decades-long history, however, the Windows codebase is not especially well suited to the decentralized nature of Linux development that Git was originally created to manage. Each Git repository contains a complete history of all the files, which proved unworkable for Windows developers because cloning the whole repository takes several hours. Microsoft has been working on a new project called the Virtual File System for Git to address these challenges. In 2021, the VFS for Git has been superseded by Scalar. Timeline of releases. Usage share and device sales. Use of Windows 10 has exceeded Windows 7 globally since early 2018. For desktop and laptop computers, according to Net Applications and StatCounter, which track the use of operating systems in devices that are active on the web, Windows was the most used operating system family in August 2021, with around 91% usage share according to Net Applications and around 76% usage share according to StatCounter. Including personal computers of all kinds, Windows OS accounted for 32.67% of usage share in August 2021, compared to Android, iOS's 13.76%, iPadOS's 2.81%, and macOS's 2.51%, according to Net Applications, and 30.73% of usage share in August 2021, compared to Android, iOS/iPadOS's 16.53%, and macOS's 6.51%, according to StatCounter. Those statistics do not include servers, as Net Applications and StatCounter use web browsing as a proxy for all use. Security. Early versions of Windows were designed at a time where malware and networking were less common, and had few built-in security features. They did not provide access privileges to allow a user to prevent other users from accessing their files, and they did not provide memory protection to prevent one process from reading or writing another process's address space, or to prevent a process from code or data used by privileged mode code. While the Windows 9X series offered the option of having profiles for multiple users, it had no concept of access privileges, allowing any user to edit others' files. In addition, while it ran separate 32-bit applications in separate address spaces, protecting an application's code and data from being read or written by another application, it did not protect the first megabyte of memory from user-land applications for compatibility reasons. This area of memory contains code critical to the functioning of the operating system, and by writing into this area of memory, an application can crash or freeze the operating system. This was a source of instability, as faulty applications could accidentally write into this region, potentially corrupting important operating system memory, which usually resulted in some form of system error and halt. Windows NT was far more secure, implementing access privileges and full memory protection, and, while 32-bit programs meeting the DoD's C2 security rating, yet these advantages were nullified by the fact that, prior to Windows Vista, the default user account created during the setup process was an administrator account. The user, and any program the user launched, had full access to the machine. Though Windows XP did offer an option of turning administrator accounts into limited accounts, the majority of home users did not do so, partially due to the number of programs which required administrator rights to function properly. As a result, most home users still ran as administrator all the time. These architectural flaws, combined with Windows's very high popularity, made Windows a frequent target of computer worm and virus writers. Furthermore, although Windows NT and its successors are designed for security and multi-user PCs, they were not initially designed with Internet security in mind as much, since, when it was first developed in the early 1990s, Internet use was less prevalent. In a 2002 strategy memo entitled Trustworthy Computing sent to every Microsoft employee, Bill Gates declared that security should become Microsoft's highest priority. Windows Vista introduced a privilege elevation system called User Account Control. When logging in as a standard user, a logon session is created and a token containing only the most basic privileges is assigned. In this way, the new logon session is incapable of making changes that would affect the entire system. When logging in as a user in the administrators group, two separate tokens are assigned. The first token contains all privileges typically awarded to an administrator, and the second is a restricted token similar to what a standard user would receive. User applications, including the Windows shell, are then started with the restricted token, resulting in a reduced privilege environment even under an administrator account. When an application requests higher privileges or Run as Administrator is clicked, UAC will prompt for confirmation and, if consent is given, start the process using the unrestricted token. Leaked documents published by WikiLeaks, codenamed Vault 7 and dated from 2013 to 2016, detail the capabilities of the CIA to perform electronic surveillance and cyber warfare, such as the ability to compromise operating systems such as Windows. In August 2019, computer experts reported that the Blue Keep security vulnerability, CVE 2019-0708, that potentially affects older unpatched Windows versions via the program's remote desktop protocol, allowing for the possibility of remote code execution, may now include related flaws, collectively named Deja Blue, affecting newer Windows versions as well. In addition, experts reported a Microsoft security vulnerability, CVE 2019-1162, based on legacy code involving Microsoft CTF and TFMan, that affects all Windows versions from Windows XP to the then most recent Windows 10 versions. A patch to correct the flaw is currently available. Microsoft releases security patches through its Windows Update service approximately once a month, although critical updates are made available at shorter intervals when necessary. Versions subsequent to Windows 2000 SP3 and Windows XP implemented automatic download and installation of updates, substantially increasing the amount of users installing security updates. Today, Windows integrates the Windows Defender antivirus, which is seen as one of the best available. Windows also implements Secure Boot, Control Flow Guard, ransomware protection, BitLocker disk encryption, a firewall, and Windows Smart Screen. File permissions. All Windows versions from Windows NT 3 have been based on a file system permission system referred to as AGDLP, in which file permissions are applied to the file/folder in the form of a local group which then has other global groups as members. These global groups then hold other groups or users depending on different Windows versions used. This system varies from other vendor products such as Linux and NetWare due to the static allocation of permission being applied directly to the file or folder. However, using this process of AGLP/AGDLP/AGDLP allows a small number of static permissions to be applied and allows for easy changes to the account groups without reapplying the file permissions on the files and folders.